The short story we read was The Man Who Is Almost a Man by Richard Wright. Our tweet says, my heart says yes, parents say no, hashtag peace out, hashtag on the railroad, hashtag take it like a man. Our pictures are the main character, Dave, who is with the mule, Jenny. Also, the railroad train, which you'll find out about later when we go over the summary. So the story summary is The Man Who Is Nearly a Man is about a 17-year-old boy named Dave and his battle to become a man. Everybody in his city was treating him like a boy, and he buys a gun so he can be more like a man. That's how I thought he could be a man. He convinces his mother to allow him to buy the gun if he gives it to his father. When he arrived home late that night, he hides it, and he took the gun to work the next morning. His greatest desire was to fire the gun, and he accidentally shot the mule while doing that because he didn't realize the kickback could shock him. And by the time he figured that out, the mule, Jenny, was bleeding to death. He ends up lying to his whole town and the man that owned the mule. And once he tells the truth to everyone laughs at him, and Dave is very ashamed. And so he takes the gun and hops on a train to never be seen again.
So my part was characters and their change. So what I said is that David really kind of never really becomes the man he wants to be, because he's always relying on the gun instead of relying on his parents, and he feels like the gun gives him that power of he'll be an independent man. And in the story it said he felt his pocket, the gun was still there, ahead of the long rails were glinting in the moonlight, stretching away to somewhere where he could be a man. So that's the point of him using going on the train, and so he continues his journey to becoming a man. And he's very immature because he's running away from his problems instead of facing them. And his childhood dies when he kills Jenny, and so he must confess to kill her and must pay for his actions because he feels really guilty. Theme. So the theme that I chose was racism, because there is racism throughout the whole story. The reason why he feels like he wants to become a man is to show people that, hey, or whites and blacks, that he's superior, and he's tired of being he's tired of the racism out there. In the first line of the story it says what's the use of talking with them in the field. And that just shows the whites in the story, they feel like they're more superior than the blacks. There was another racism shown, and it said he felt very confident until he saw Fat Joe walk through the rear door, then his courage began to ooze. And that just shows that Dave is he just is not, he can't really handle being around white people. And so instead of him becoming confident, it just turns into anxiety. And so that's the purpose of him having a gun, because he wants to show them hey, he's not scared. And so he says I could kill a man white with a gun like this, kill anybody black or white.
And the overall complexity of the story is that Dave wants to become a man really, really bad. He wants to make manly decisions and not be oppressed by his family in town. And yet, when faced with manly responsibilities, for the first time, he runs away, unable to face himself and the consequences of his actions. He was also still scared of holding the gun, which shows how you can't just buy something and expect it to change your whole personality. As for the setting, it lacks a significant setting other than a place and time, which is probably uh, deep south in the late 1800s, but this is on purpose. It's meant to convey that Dave doesn't really care about the world around him. He only cares about the gun in his hand because he's obsessing over it. So it helps put more emphasis on the imagery of the gun in Dave. And when Dave's obsession breaks after he shoots Jenny, he's kind of like sees the world again. And when he can see the world again, other things than the gun can be described in the story, particularly the train. And the final paragraph goes into great detail about the train. And when he jumps on the train, it signifies that Dave's now fixated on running away and the concept of the train.
So the narrative structure and explanation is it was linear structure. It helped to develop the way Dave had left his home to chase after manlyhood, reveals why he wanted to become a man. He felt like a mule, no longer wanted to be run over, and he didn't want people to talk to him as if he was a little boy still. The only way he thought he could become man was by owning the gun, which he was fixated on throughout the majority of the story, up until the end where he just wanted to leave. The linear structure shows how the events leading up to him shooting Mr. Hawkins' donkey, Jenny, and then after shooting the donkey, it describes what happened after, which helped to show why Dave felt the need to leave, because he felt so embarrassed and didn't want to face the consequences he had.
Third person limited is the main point of view that is used within this short story. The reason that they did third person limited, looking at Dave's thoughts instead of using first person, was to show that this isn't just a feeling that's completely unique to Dave. Lots of people feel this way. So by leaving it in third person, it opened it up to more people than just him. Because it is third person limited, we do get to see Dave's thoughts, and so we get to see what he wants, which in this case was the power and the feeling of manlyhood, which he perceives is through a gun. We also find out that there's this internal conflict that he has, that even when he has his symbol of masculinity in his hand, he's still afraid. We know he doesn't want to deal with the consequences of his actions as well, because once he kills the donkey, instead of dealing with it like a man would and owning up to what he did and paying off the donkey, instead he runs away. And he believes that running away will allow him to become a man. So all of these show Dave's need for respect and his warped view on how to get it, because instead of doing what a man would do, he runs away from all his problems.